So we have a great pleasure of speaking with Professor Robert Landewe, who has been co-chairing the EULAR recommendation session. Thank you for speaking to us, Professor Landewe. The entire community looks forward to these updated EULAR recommendations, but could you just tell us about what these recommendations are about?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it, because I'm almost emotional about the recommendation session that will follow soon this afternoon. It is among many of the high points in EULAR conferences. The updates of EULAR recommendations always are at the top, so to say, and that is because in our rheumatology realm, we always obviously deal with patients, and we have to treat them and to provide them with the best options available. And in my capacity as chair of quality of care of EULAR for these 2 years, I'm responsible for sort of maintaining the guidelines that are there, and we within EULAR call them recommendations, because we find the word guidelines a little bit too strict. It sort of sounds as if you have to do it and cannot deviate from them anymore. But recommendations is good, because the recommendations reflect the current standard of care. And because standard of care very often changes, it evolves over time, we have to update those recommendations, well, pretty often, so to say. So when it comes to the big disciplines like rheumatoid arthritis and axial spondyloarthritis, indeed we have a cycle in which we try to update every 3 to 4 years the existing recommendations. So what will be presented today is updates of axial spondyloarthritis, which is the second update, the third version already. But for rheumatoid arthritis, we are talking about number 4 or 5. So if you compare those updates of recommendations over time, you see the evolution actually, and that is what makes it always timely and always very interesting and important to be informed about them.
Yeah, I think the great thing about these recommendations is that they talk to the doctors, but they also talk to health professionals and patients. So just going back to your point about the updates coming out and calling them recommendations, what do we already know about the topics that we're going to hear about, just briefly?
Well, it's not only axial spondyloarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis, it is also ANCA-associated vasculitis, which is a discipline that receives much more attention than a couple of years ago, which is good. Actually, every doctor or patient or health professional who reads them will not be surprised by what he or she sees, because actually everything is already in the domain for years and years, but it has been updated, it has been carefully looked upon again, and it has been completed with the new evidence that has come in the field over the last couple of years. So I don't expect surprise. I do expect a lot of recognition and not so much of oohs and ahs, and that is for a committee as quality of care, which is a bit conservative, and we as a quality of care committee are a bit of a conservative committee, and it is good to be conservative in this field, because not the entire field will change every 2 or 3 years, but we try to carefully update and to include the novelties. If you ask me, are there many novelties in the guidelines? No, not so many, but what has been changed will be alluded to in the session. I think that will be very good.
Yeah. Thanks, Professor Landewe. Could you give us an idea of what the structure, the format of these recommendations look like, perhaps for someone that has not looked at these recommendations before?
Yeah. Well, typically recommendations are bullet points, and typically the recommendations for the management of, and then mention a particular disease, contains a list of bullet points of approximately 10 to 12, up to 15 or something like that, but it usually starts with what we call overarching principles. Overarching principles are principles that more or less set the stage. So they, for instance, state what is truly important and appreciated by everybody in the field as a very normal thing. Every bullet list reads shared decision-making with the patient, which is considered by those who develop the recommendations as truly important, as an example. And then The list of overarching principles, usually 5 or 6 or 4 or whatever, is followed by a list of bullet points, usually 1 or 2 sentence statements that more or less cover the entire field, very often about treatment, sometimes about diagnosis and treatment of a particular disease, of a particular condition.
Okay, that's great. And just to lead on from it and perhaps close, how can patients make use of these recommendations that get updated so frequently?
Well, first of all, they could read them themselves. Second, very often for the important diseases in the field, lay versions of the recommendations are made. Third, these bullet points rarely read by themselves. Although you can understand what they say, it is very important to read the accompanying text. Fourth, but that is maybe a little bit difficult for patients, but if you can always talk to your doctor and ask your doctor whether he or she has heard about the recommendations, whether she works according to the recommendations, and why the doctor deviates from a particular recommendations in a particular situation. So it sort of enriches the discussion between patient and doctor, and that is what we strive for.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for speaking to us, Professor Landewe, and enlightening us about the EULAR recommendations. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.